So good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank Professor Azad for this honor and opportunity. And I will speak on buckling for unusual breaks. So the mechanism of scleral buckling is that the buckle is pressed inward, the sclera is pressed inward to close the retinal break. And this causes the choroid to get opposed to the retina, closing the break, as well as vitreous traction on the break itself is reduced. However, very important is accurate placement of the buckle with an adequate height, commensurate with the break. Now, why should we attempt scleral buckling in any given case is because it has the advantage of avoiding post-operative cataract, unlike vitrectomy, which is especially important for young patients where accommodation is important. And there is a huge cost benefit compared to vitrectomy. Before we know what is unusual situations, it's better to know what are favorable situations for a buckle. Anterior breaks, breaks in the same quadrant or in the same anteroposterior level, small breaks, operculated breaks without traction, a single break which may be large, a shallow RD or a holes in lattice, a peripheral dialysis. These are easy to buckle. Also easy or more successful in phakic eyes, young patients, high myopia. High myopia mainly because even vitrectomy has its challenges. No PVD. By no PVD, I mean the vitreous is attached but without traction to the retina. No PVR and the gel vitreous. Now, a gel vitreous helps a buckle because it acts like a tamponade inside the eye and closes the break because it is itself solid and it does not escape through the break externally during the SRF drainage. So this is why a gel vitreous is favorable. In the absence of PVD, the tractional forces on the retina are not strong, whereas if there is a partial PVD, there is a persistent traction on the retina and the break, which keeps the retina detached. And in this situation, the retinal break is usually small, and a small narrow buckle can close the break. Another unfavorable situation is when there is an incomplete PVD, as I explained, because that continues to keep the tear open, and the retina also has a traction internally. So in this situation, we need a high and wide buccal effect to oppose the retina to choroid. And you also need a gas tamponade internally to close the retinal tear, especially if the vitreous is liquefied, that doesn't do the job of internal tamponade. And so you need air or gas. So this is how the incomplete PVD will keep a break open. Now, if we have to use in these situations, whenever we have to use a high and wide buckle, it is important to create a hypotony by doing a drainage of the SRF externally and with or without paracentesis. And also we might need to put gas or air because usually the break doesn't close completely on the table. So we need an internal tamponade for the first few days. Now, how to decide whether the vitreous is liquefied or not? One of the indicators can be a patient's age. After the age of 60, most patients, 70% of the patients are likely to have vitreous liquefaction. With regard to PVD, pseudophakic eyes, most of the pseudophakic eyes within 6 months of cataract surgery develop a PVD. And possibly that's the reason that the success rate, one of the reasons for poor success rate of buckling in pseudophakic eyes. Liquefaction and PVD are not always correlated, and we have to assess these two separately. So as I said, PVD, more than 63% of the patients over the age of 70 will have PVD. And PVD can be assessed best by using OCT, which can show the adhesion of the posterior vitreous to the optic nerve or the retina. Because in a detached eye, ultrasound may be less reliable. Detached retina. This is to show the role of vitreous. There's a small operculated break inferotemporally, which should normally have responded to a circumferential buckle. But because you can see on the OCT, there is vitreous adhesion to the fovea, this did not resolve. In fact, there was persistent SRF. And finally, it required gas tamponade as a second step to attach the retina because of the presence of PVD. Now, these are other unfavorable situations. You can have large posterior tears, which are not amenable to regular buckles. But you can, if you're pressed to the wall and you have to do it, then you can do radial sponge under these posterior tears. You might put 2 sponges if there are 2 separate tears. Or if there is a large inferior break, you can have a circumferential broad tire under the circumferential encerclage to close the tear on the table. If it's a very large tear, sometimes one sponge or radial buckle is not enough and you may need 2 side by side. And in this situation, the circumferential buckle, if it is put, should be of low height. Otherwise, it causes fish mouthing of the large tear. And it's possible to close these tears, as you see on the right side, with a radial buckle. If you have a lattice with degeneration, but then a tear also posteriorly, then you can, for the lattice, we need a circumferential band. And then for the additional tears, we can add radial buckles in the quadrants necessary. Now, these things, as Dr. Azad was mentioning, we used to do a lot of these earlier. When I was being trained, I was seeing a lot of these surgeries being done by Professor Azad and Professor Tiwari. But now I think we don't do so much because it requires a lot of effort on the table, a lot of time, and a lot of manipulation and a lot of suspense during and after surgery. So nowadays we just move to vitreous surgery. When there are tears in different rows, then we can support with additional radial buckles in addition to a circumferential buckle. But what is a prerequisite for all these kind of situations is that we have to do an SRF drainage to be even able to understand whether the buckle is placed properly. And cryopexy is important because laser is not possible in these situations, and LIO may not achieve the reaction because the retina is not even attached. And even if it is attached because of drainage, because of the edema, retinal edema, it's not easy to achieve LIO laser. So cryo is a must for these breaks before you place the buckle. Then in the presence of PVR, it is unusual situation, but you can get away with it if there is a PVR C1 only, especially if the patient is young, shallow RD and small retinal breaks, buckle might succeed. Now, cryo is mandatory, but as I said, in these posterior breaks, it is unfortunately, we might end up doing cryo on the macula or on the optic disc, which will be a disaster because we don't see the tip of the cryo in these situations. And we might assume that the shaft of the cryo probe is the tip, and we might actually end up damaging the vital structures. So it's very important to place the tip carefully. Even when we can't see, we have to see very carefully. A lot of complications in these situations can be fish mouthing of the breaks, scleral perforation because of going very deep in posteriorly, surgical failure because of inaccurate location, inadequate height, missed breaks, and perforation can lead to massive bleeding subretinal, which can trickle into the submacular area, causing permanent vision loss. If that is detected, then immediately put gas and prone position to remove the submacular blood. And similarly, a perforation can cause retinal incarceration. So these are the reasons we do try to avoid buckles nowadays in unusual situations. Long-term complications can be vitreous opacities because vitrectomy was never done, PVR progression, epimacular membrane, macular scarring, and then later on buccal extrusion, infection, and high buckles can cause intrusion through the sclera into the globe. And then these are the last slides where we might want to do an encircling element along with vitreous surgery, but these are controversial situations like a giant retinal tear, viral retinitis with RD and colobomas. So in a giant retinal tear, people may not want to put a circumferential buckle, but I do put it because it does support the vitreous base, but you have to be very careful. The buckle has to be very low height to prevent fish mouthing. And similarly, in a CMV retinitis, I always put a band to support the thinned out retina in the periphery with multiple atrophic breaks. So a band gives a lot of support in the periphery. And also it counteracts the late traction which happens in ARN. As you can see here, the traction beginning to happen, but because of the high buccal height, patient's retina is still attached. But of course, this is a clear no-no. When you have thinned out sclera and staphylomas, then no buckling. Thank you.